Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Wednesday edition on my YouTube channel. As you guys know, this is when I am going to be giving out my top starts and sits for fantasy football in week 11. So why don't I go ahead and dive into this? I don't have no big spiel to go on. So let's start at the quarterback position as always, starting with my top starts. And this is one that's going to be playing tomorrow night. If you're looking for a streaming option, I know he's the latest buzz because of how good he has been playing this year in his rookie season. It's Mac Jones against the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are actually giving up, they're tied for the second most allowed points per game to the quarterback position, sitting at 21.5 points a game. They're one of the worst defenses in the league. We just saw what the Cowboys did to them last week, and I think that can carry over to success for the Patriots offense tomorrow night. If you're looking for a streaming quarterback, I think Mac Jones can at least get you a couple touchdowns. At least that's what I'm betting on. I'm actually thinking about betting. I was looking at some of the player prop bets for tomorrow night, and I think it's currently set at 1.5 touchdowns over under for Mac Jones, and I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and take that. And I just like the chances that they're going to be able to move the ball quite often against the Atlanta defense, and they're going to be in the red zone and put themselves in scoring position quite often tomorrow night. And all you need is Mac to toss a touchdown to Hunter Henry, Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, one of the guys that he has multiple outlets that he can toss the ball to. So if you're looking for a streaming option, I think Mac Jones might be somebody for you to consider in week 11. Another streaming option you might want to consider, I think it's going to be Trevor Lawrence against the 49ers. I know he kind of had a rough outing against the Colts this past week, but I mean, obviously I watched that game as a Colts fan, and I rewatch all these games to make sure I'm not talking lies to you guys. But the thing with Trevor Lawrence is not, there are things he could do better, but sometimes his guys can help him out. There's a lot of drops that the Jaguars have dealt with, or Trevor has dealt with this season. So if some guys can start catching the ball, he's going to be able to put up some numbers and be a good streaming quarterback throughout the rest of the season. When you look at the matchup, the 49ers have tied for the fifth most allowed points per game to the quarterback position. They're giving up 19.7 points a game. So I could definitely see this being a matchup where Trevor has a nice little outing for you. I think he's definitely a good play in 2 quarterback leagues this week, and especially if you're looking for a streaming option in deeper leagues. So if you're looking for somebody, I would definitely consider Trevor Lawrence against the 49ers. Now my top sits, this one definitely pains me to say as a Colts fan, but yeah, Carson Wentz against the Bills. I don't think he's a good streaming option at all this week. I know he's been, I guess he had technically a down fantasy game last week since he didn't get a touchdown. I know he had a long streak of where he was getting at least 2+ passing touchdowns in a game. I want to say for like 6 or 7 games in a row. But if you're looking at Carson to possibly stream this week because you're thinking maybe they might get in a shootout with the Bills, which is still possible. It's 100% possible. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to come down to the wire. But with that being said, you got to look at the numbers. The Bills have allowed the fewest amount of points per game to quarterbacks this year. They're only giving up 10.6. So yeah, if I was setting up my DFS lineup, if I was setting up my fantasy lineup and I stream my quarterbacks and I had to choose between Carson Wentz or Trevor Lawrence or Mac Jones, I'm choosing one of those top 2 guys already named as a starter over Carson Wentz, even though he's plays for my favorite team. So that's all you got to know about that situation. Then my other sit involves the opposite quarterback of Mac Jones that is playing in that game tomorrow night, and that's going to be Matt Ryan against the Patriots. The Patriots have allowed the second fewest amount of points per game to the quarterback position. They're only giving up 13.8. And then you just got to look at it and be honest with yourself. Matt's not really a good streaming quarterback at this point because he only has Kyle Pitts. Calvin Ridley is dealing with his personal issues so he has not yet to return to the team. Cordero Patterson is a game time decision, and I want to say he's probably not going to play. I think it's a high ankle sprain, and I think they're just running it up to a game time decision to try to play as much games as they can with Bill Belichick. So he doesn't have a lot of passing options, and it's a Bill Belichick defense. So I would never consider streaming Matt Ryan. So if you're thinking about it, go consider playing Mac Jones tomorrow night or Trevor Lawrence on Sunday. So again, my top starts and sits for my top starts for the quarterback position: Mac Jones against the Falcons, Trevor Lawrence against the 49ers. My top sits: Carson Wentz against the Bills and Matt Ryan against the Patriots. So let's just go ahead and keep this thing on moving for you guys. We're moving into the running back position, moving into my top starts, starting with Myles Gaskin against the Jets. He definitely let me down last week. No, he wasn't a top star for me last week. That was the week before, which reminds me, Myles Gaskin is an every other week fantasy running back. If you go look at his numbers, one week he does bad, and next week he does good. And guess what he did? He did bad last week against the Ravens. So, with that being said, he's probably due for a big time matchup this week. And not only he's probably due for a big time matchup this week, he's got a great opportunity to put up some points against the Jets. They have allowed the most points per game to running backs this year. They're giving up 31.6 points a game. So, I definitely like Myles to be heavily involved and get a lot of points for you this week. So, I definitely would consider sliding him into your lineup if you got him. My other start, I'm going with James Conner against the Seahawks. The Seahawks have struggled to defend the run. And then you're just talking about we don't know what's going on with the quarterback position. Kyler Murray did practice today. I guess he is trending towards playing, but they kind of said that like 2 weeks ago. So until I see that final injury report, I don't want to count on it. So whether it's Colt McCoy or their third string back, or maybe even if it's like a less than 100% Kyler, they're probably going to want to take off the pressure of the running back and probably take off the pressure of the quarterback and lean on the running game, especially against the Seahawks, who have somewhat struggled against the run this year. And then when you look at the fantasy numbers, the Seahawks have allowed the third most points per game to running backs. They're giving up 23.8. So I definitely like this to be a high ceiling play for James Conner this week. And then taking a look at my sits, as you can see, I didn't want to list out all 4 running backs for the Eagles. I said any running back from the Eagles against the Saints this week. A couple reasons. Miles Sanders got activated from IR today, so Miles Sanders is back. First things first, if you got Miles Sanders, this is how I view it. Like, I don't like playing players that come back from an injury. I don't like doing it unless it's an absolute stud, a guaranteed player that you know what you're going to get. Even if he's less than 100%, he's going to ball out for you. We haven't got that from Miles Sanders to trust that situation. So I would at least want to see one game out of him post-injury. And then on top of that, we don't know if they're going to go ahead and just give Miles the full rock. We don't know if they're going to split the touches between Miles, Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, and Kenneth Gainwell. So it's just a muddy situation that I wouldn't want to deal with this week. And then you take a look at the matchup. They're going against one of the traditionally best rushing defenses in the league, where the Saints they're allowing the second fewest amount of points per game to running backs. They're only giving up 14.1 points a game. So if you had Miles Sanders, you've been sitting on him. I know I have him in a league or two. I'm not trying to rush him back into my lineup. I want to see how he plays this weekend and then go forward from there. And then my other sit, that's where I messed up last week when I was talking about Myles Gaskin. It's Devin Singletary. I do apologize, guys. Apparently, Matt Breida got involved last week and took away that rushing touchdown away from Devin. But yeah, I would consider not playing Devin this week, and Zach Moss as well. They are going against the Colts. The Colts have a really good rushing defense, especially with DeForest Buckner up in the middle. And then you got Darius Leonard controlling the middle of the defense as well. And they've allowed the third fewest amount of points per game to running backs this year. They've only given up 14.3. I think this is going to be a game where the Bills are going to lean on the pass, because you can kind of pick apart that pass that coverage, that secondary of the Colts. So I don't expect the Singletary or Moss to have a huge game against the Colts. So if you had them, you're thinking about playing them, I would take a look at maybe a James Conner or a Myles Gaskin. So again, yeah, my top starts, those two guys, Conner and Gaskin. Gaskin against the Jets, Conner against the Seahawks. My sits, any of the Eagles running backs, just avoid playing them against the Saints this week. And then Devin Singletary and Zach Moss against the Colts. And then go ahead and move into my starts and sits for the wide receiver position. Starting with my top start of the week, I'm going with Brandon Cooks against the Titans. The Texans are coming off a bye week, and they are going to be as refreshed as possible. And they're playing their divisional rival in the Titans. And, the Titans defense is very stingy up front, but they are still liable to give up some things in the air. And as far as fantasy numbers, they have allowed the most points per game against wide receivers. They've given up 30 points a game. Brandon Cooks is basically the only really real receiving threat in Houston. He's going to get peppered with targets, and he's got a good matchup. So if there's a week to use Brandon Cooks, it's definitely this week. And so I would get him in your lineup. My other start, I think you can ride the wave of the Cam Newton jolt to the Panthers offense this week. I got DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson against the football team. The football team has allowed the second most allowed points per game to the wide receiver position. They're giving up 27.4 points a game. It is trending that Cam Newton is going to be the starter this week, so you can expect maybe some more running options, but that will involve DJ Moore. He can be used as a runner, and then they also can use Robbie Anderson on some crossers and whatnot, and get open for Cam on short intermediate routes, and they'll probably take some shots with him here and there throughout the game. So I definitely think those two are a good play. Definitely DJ Moore, and I think Robbie Anderson's kind of depending on your roster. And if you needed to play him this week, I would. Kind of like I said on the waiver wire video last night, which if you haven't watched it, go back and watch. Robbie's more of a bench play right now, but if you need somebody this week, he actually has a great matchup if you needed to lean on him. My top sits of the week, another painful thing for me to say, but yeah, it's Michael Pittman Jr. against the Bills. The Bills have allowed the fewest amount of points per game to the wide receiver position, only giving up 14.2 points a game. Pittman Jr. more than likely is going to get shadowed by Tre'Davious White, maybe not like throughout the whole game, but often throughout the game. I might be surprised if he gets some coverage shift his way. So the other Colts wide receivers are going to have to step up in this game. I know Pittman Jr. has been on a nice little hot streak for his fantasy owners, but if there was a game where he's going to have lay a dud for you, it definitely would be this one, especially because of how good that Bills defense is this year. So if you have Michael Pittman Jr., I mean, if you do play him, just temper your expectations. But if you have an option that you can maybe turn to other than Pittman Jr., I would highly consider it. My other sit, same thing, kind of like Diontae Johnson. I don't know where Chase Claypool is. I know he's technically like week to week, so we'll have to see if he's able to return this week or not. But yeah, Diontae Johnson or Chase Claypool against the Chargers this week. Chargers have allowed the second fewest amount of points per game to the wide receiver position. They're only giving up 15.8 points a game. That's because teams can run all over them. So this is probably going to be a Najee Harris show. And then you want to factor into a couple things, right? Mason Rudolph is probably going to be the quarterback, I'm guessing. And if he's the quarterback, I don't trust that situation. And then you look at the matchups where they're not giving up a lot of fantasy points. So that's definitely something I don't want to count on. And then even if Big Ben does play, if he gets those negative tests in time for Sunday night, you're talking about Big Ben who has not practiced all week. So there may be some rust there, maybe some chemistry there. So if there is some other options you can lean on other than Diontae, and then we'll have to see, like I said, if Chase Claypool is going to play or not. I know he's dealing with that toe injury. I would just consider other options. But again, same thing like I said about Pittman Jr. for Diontae Johnson. If you got to play him, I get it. He's their top wide receiver on that team. He's probably going to get peppered with targets, but I would just lower your expectations. If he doesn't have a good night, it's just because of the matchup, right? So again, my top starts of the week for wide receivers, Brandon Cooks against the Titans, and then DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson against the football team. My top sits, Michael Pittman Jr. against the Bills, and then Diontae Johnson or Chase Claypool against the Chargers. So let's go ahead and put a bow on this episode and talk about the old tight end position that everybody just hates to love. But yeah, the tight end position, I think my two starts are some good streaming options for this week. CJ Uzomah against the Raiders. The Raiders have allowed the second most allowed points per game to tight ends this year. They've been giving up 11.5 points a game. I would not be surprised if they shift their focus on the outside guys, like on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and I think that's going to open up things in the middle of the defense. For Uzomah, Denzel Perryman, great, I was pretty solid rushing linebacker. Kind of struggles in coverage, right? So that's a guy that can attack with CJ Uzomah. So I think he is a good streaming option at the tight end position. The other guy I think is Cole Kmet against the Ravens. Cole Kmet's been coming along over the last few weeks. He's kind of developing chemistry. He's kind of somewhat being the trusty target for Justin Fields. And they're going against the Ravens this week. And the Ravens have tied for the third most allowed points per game to tight ends this year. They've been giving up 11.3. Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison, they're still kind of learning how to be better coverage linebackers. Again, those guys are more of run stuffers at this point of their careers. I think Patrick Queen will get there as he gets more reps by year 3. Definitely by that. That's another talk I could do, but yeah. Either way, I think Cole Kmet's a good option. He's being more involved in the offense. I think Justin's kind of leaning on him. I think they're maybe developing something there for maybe the future of this offense. But yeah, and then the numbers say it's a pretty good matchup if you're looking to stream a tight end. I think Cole Kmet would be a good option this week. My top sits, another guy that's kind of been a streaming option this year is Gerald Everett against the Cardinals. I would avoid playing him this year. The Cardinals have been the best defense against tight ends in fantasy. They've allowed the fewest amount of points per game, only giving up 3.7 points a game. I think that's because they got Isaiah Simmons, one of my favorite players from his draft class. He can easily cover most of the tight ends at this level because of his size and speed. So I think that's why we see a big factor in why tight ends are not scoring a lot of points against the Cardinals. So if you're thinking about streaming Gerald Everett because he had a decent game against the Packers, I would avoid playing him this week. And then my other sit, this is definitely a temporary expectations. I always say this with guys like Mark Andrews. He's elite tight end. He's one of the top guys in their passing attack for the Ravens. So I understand you're going to play Mark Andrews, but if he has a bad outing, just understand the matchup just wasn't in his favor this week. If you're putting together a DFS lineup, I would avoid playing Mark Andrews. The Bears have allowed the fifth fewest amount of points per game to tight ends this year. They're only giving up 5 points a game. So yeah, if you have them, temper the expectations. If you're putting together DFS lineups, I would completely avoid them this week. So yeah, my top starts for tight ends, CJ Uzomah against the Raiders, and then Cole Kmet against the Ravens. My top sits, Gerald Everett against the Cardinals and Mark Andrews against the Bears. So yeah, that is my video for you guys today. As always, I do appreciate anybody that took their time out to watch this video. If you enjoyed the video, as always, hit the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, go tell a friend to check me out. You don't gotta hide me from your fellow fantasy league members. I'm telling you. I'm going to tell, like my buddy Eric, my good friend Eric told me when he tells his friends, like, hey, they can come to me for the same advice that you are getting too, so you can spread the love for me, right? Let's get that subscriber amount up. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. As always, go check out the Prospect Encyclopedia if you haven't at prospectencyclopedia.com, where you can check out all that information, the entire PDFs for $15, individual team PDFs for $1. As I always say, Buck sections for free if you want to see what it's all about. I wrote the section, so please do go check that out. We did some great things with that. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and head out. You guys know I will be back on Saturday to do my Week 11 preview video. And then if anybody has any football questions, fantasy football questions, always hit up the comments in my videos. I will answer you back. You can DM me on Twitter at Cody Talks NFL. You can just at me on Twitter too. I'm not afraid to talk publicly about it. So yeah, everybody knows how they can get a hold of me if they want to get my fantasy football advice. So I'll see you guys Saturday, and you guys enjoy the rest of the week.